Welcome. My name is Whitney Lee. I'm a developer advocate, and I'm here with Peter. Peter, will you introduce yourself, please?
Thanks for having me here. I'm Peter Wilcsinszky. I'm one of the maintainers of the logging operator. I work at exaflow.com, where we contribute to the logging operator, and I'm a software engineer, product owner, engineering manager, and sometimes even a DevOps engineer.
So Peter and I just spent the last 2 hours having a conversation about logging operator. I knew almost nothing 2 hours ago, and now I know all of this. And we figure you might not have 2 hours to watch that. So we're going to sum it up for you in this recap. So Peter, when you and I talked, we started talking about what was life like before logging operator? What problem is it solving?
The life before logging operator was like you had to configure multiple tools. You always had kubectl logs at your fingertips, but that's just not a reliable way to forward logs to a remote destination. That's why a lot of legwork had to be done, and the logging operator tries to help keeping you from doing all this tiresome work.
And then you gave me a nice succinct definition that logging operator is a multi-tenant log management solution for Kubernetes. Now include telemetry. But like this beautiful definition, this nice, short, beautiful definition, the word management is such a loaded word for log management. So it can include collecting, routing, transforming, understanding destinations and protocols, isolation, and maybe filtering. It's so fun to be in tech that like the very simple explanation usually has like a lot of weight behind it in terms of what it means. Then you talked to me about how does it work. So you talked about how maybe log collection works more generally, and then how logging operator solves some of the problems that happen. So will you go over some of these problems of like how it works without logging operator?
Yeah, we started with the problems. That's usually not the right way to talk about things,
I
but
think it's perfect.
yeah, we highlighted a few problems that you have to solve when you deal with log collection and forwarding in Kubernetes, and we enumerated these like logs are produced, and Kubernetes is unopinionated about these logs, but you have to manage these somehow, and there are different problems that you need different tools and not just a trivial architecture to deal with.
There's so much to figure out here. As someone who's brand new, I didn't understand all this complexity. So it's like, oh, I just want some logs and I just want to send them to a remote destination. It seems pretty straightforward. But then you're like, okay, first you need to install a daemon set to collect and forward the logs. As soon as you install a daemon set, you're making an opinionated choice. You're adding software. Probably FluentBit, you said. Then you need to make routing decisions. So then like which logs go to which destination? They might not all go to the same destination. Which metadata is added? Which metadata is used? And this part, it seems like can get very complex. And then you taught me about credentials needed. So we have FluentBit probably if that's your collecting. Yes. So it's going to need credentials to be able to access wherever the destination is. But then FluentBit is also going to need RBAC permissions to access Kube API. And all of that is something to consider and manage. Also, you're giving FluentBit cluster level access, which is something to think about. And then you talked about the problem of back pressure and buffers. Do you want to go over that a little bit?
You have to make a decision or balance these concerns, whether you want to buffer logs if a destination is down or slower than the logs are produced. So you either have to buffer or put back pressure on your inputs, and that's not always an easy decision to make. But sooner or later you have to deal with that. All these things that we talked about are entry to implement a solution that seems trivial or just introduces a single tool that collects logs from your nodes. But some of these problems that we touched might require an additional component in the architecture, which is the aggregator that at the end forwards logs to the final destinations. And this is why another component had to be introduced,
which is FluentD. And so part of what's hard here, there's just like a lot of complexity of these decisions. And developers care about their logs, but maybe don't want to have to deal with all this complexity. And then another problem that's happening now is when you're making all these decisions, you're adding opinions. And so different teams might have different opinions about how it should go, especially in terms of like this back pressure problem. One team may prefer speed and the other team may prefer that we don't lose any logs and sacrifice some speed. And what do you do with the multi-tenancy problem? So that's where the logging operator comes in. That's the stage we've set for the logging operator to swoop in with a superhero cape on and power pose and help manage all of this stuff. So you taught me about two of the most important custom resources that logging operator introduces, which are flows and outputs. So tell me about the flow custom resource.
The flow custom resource is what provides Kubernetes-native API to solve the routing problem based on Kubernetes primitives like the namespace and the pod labels. This is a way for administrators to define a set of rules in a single block, or for providing more autonomy to developer teams by providing their own flows or conditions, what kind of logs they want to send where and what kind of transformations they want to apply on those logs. And what is also important to highlight here is that we shifted this concern from fluent bits. So we shifted this from initially from the collection layer to the aggregation layer. So this is flows and outputs are all implemented in fluentd traditionally with the logging operator. And this concept change with a new component, which is called the Telemetry Controller, which we will touch later, but that give a solution to the same problem, but reiterating the whole idea, the whole problem space, and trying to provide more flexibility.
So just very quickly, the output is pretty straightforward. It's a custom resource that's used to connect a flow to a destination. So it's where you put in your connection details, the protocols, etc. And then logging operator solves a bunch of other problems, like if you need to scale fluentd down without losing logs. It solves a noisy neighbor problem, so one tenant can't take more than their fair share of resources. And it can also provide stronger isolation as needed for security reasons. And then all this time we've been talking about logs, we've been meaning container logs, but logging operator also has extensions and can work with other kinds of logs, like host machine logs, Kubernetes event logs, and the sidecar webhook. So that sidecar webhook can be used to inject a sidecar into a pod to capture additional logs there.
Typically, applications, at least modern applications, also just like Kubernetes, trying not to be too much concerned with logging at least. And they just write logs to standard out, standard error, and the container runtime collects that, writes out to disk, and there is the point where the logging operator can come in. But there are some applications, mostly legacy apps, that might write to some files or write to multiple different files, and you can just write everything to standard out. And in that case, that's a helpful way to solve this problem.
Then one more cool thing the logging operator does in terms of it separates inputs for different tenants. We talked about this problem of back pressure and buffering. So we talk about the separating inputs.
This problem came up or came very apparent when we introduced the concept of this stronger isolation with different aggregators for different tenants, so that they can do whatever they want, scale their own aggregators, use as much resources as they need, and don't affect each other's configuration. This is all great, but what if a tenant goes down? What if their aggregator goes down? What should happen down the line, back to the root of the pipeline, where FluentBit or any collector tries to read the logs, coming logs from their input? Should their buffer how much should they buffer soon can be a problem because these collectors are running on the nodes, and it has a risk of filling up space. Or if they run out of space, what should happen? The alternative in this case is to stop the input, but you can't stop the whole input because that would stop all the other tenants as well, which is an availability problem, which is a security issue, a security concern. So this is why it was required to separate these different inputs on the tenant boundaries, and this is implemented in FluentBit right at the collection layer.
And then we happen to be doing this episode about logging operator. It seems at an exciting time because you're added to the Telemetry Controller, which seems like a pretty big upgrade. Will you talk about that?
We learned a lot throughout the journey. We knew from the beginning that it would be great for the collector layer to have more flexibility. But with FluentBit, we couldn't really do this because the configuration wasn't easy to manage, even with an additional layer on top. With FluentD, we could do this, but we couldn't use FluentD as the collector because it would consume too much resources. So that's not possible. So we have two tools to solve these problems, but more and more users requested for something more lightweight and more flexible at the same time. So we figured we have to try another tool, and the Open Telemetry Collector is on the rise for a few years now. We experimented with it. We had some dead ends, it seemed, but later, with new features introduced to the Open Telemetry Collector, we could actually implement the ideas that we had in our mind to solve the problem of routing as close to the source as possible and provide the multi-tenant user experience that would empower administrators, defining tenants, defining cluster level routing policies, but at the same time giving more autonomy to developer teams or customers sharing the same Kubernetes cluster. So flexibility is shifted closer to the source, to the collector layer, but filtering, transformation, parsing, processing, all these compute heavy and high risk operations that would risk that something goes wrong. You might either make a mistake and break the config, or you use too much resource and consume resources, and the noisy neighbor problem emerges again. To avoid this, effective routing in a multi-tenant way, and the collector part replacing FluentBit, we now open up interoperability with the existing logging operator managed FluentD, but also opening for new aggregators, any aggregator or any endpoint that provides an OTLP ingest, so we can integrate with that as well. And our primary solution that we can help the most with is Access syslog project that combines the power of syslog ng with logging operators, Kubernetes-native interfaces, so that users can leverage an aggregator that is supported by the community, by our company, but they can also choose to run their own Open Telemetry Collector if they want, so they have the option to choose.
This has been a super awesome recap, a great way to spend a morning with you. Thank you for your time and expertise. One more question. Where should folks go if they want to learn more and get involved?
There are a few places they can go. First, kube-logging.dev is the website where the logging operator documentation lives, and also pointers to the GitHub project, to the organization. The Telemetry Controller is part of the same organization called kube-logging. It just lives in a separate repository, and they will find links to the CNCF community Slack and to our Discord server as well. we are present all those places, so we are happy to answer questions and to help with any issues. And we frequently blog on the exoflow.com/blog page, not just about logging operator, but you can find a lot of content about logging operator, multi-tenancy, and also solutions about XSysLog, which is another open source project that we build and support.
Thank you so much. Thanks for sharing your time with us. Goodbye.
A lot. Thanks for having me. Bye-bye.